It's interesting. I've been on a few film juries in the past few years, and this is by far the highest quality in general work that we've seen because it's been a struggle for a lot of people to make 3D in the past few years. So people will experiment and maybe they're not so good, but they want to get recognized, so they'll submit to festivals. And now that we have a lot of examples in the theater that we see that are really high quality, I think people have realized what good 3D is, and there's a lot of really great 3D here at the conference. I'm very impressed. We're starting that. It's an interesting time because Hollywood has been doing 3D in this era of 3D since 2004, when Polar Express started. And it took off. There were a lot of films, and then it slowed down a little bit. There's a lot of news about how 3D isn't doing very well, but it's not really true because we have over 30 films in 3D that are opening this year. I mean, that's a lot of films. And they're all very high quality productions. So I think we're at an interesting time now where 3D production has spread around the world. It's happening in major cities everywhere. It's on television, it's in cinema, it's on personal devices. I think it's a really interesting time, but it's a quiet time for 3D too. Gravity, the recent film, is probably the most notable 3D film, I would say, since Avatar, really. Life of Pi certainly did a nice job, but Avatar really made people aware of the fact that high caliber filmmakers like Jim Cameron are interested in this medium, and not because it's a gimmick, but because it's a useful storytelling tool. And other filmmakers have now come along and started to do the same thing. So it's important as an industry that we have films like Gravity that remind people that you can tell an amazing story in 3 dimensions that you couldn't tell in 2 dimensions. It would be a completely different story. Very respected filmmakers are not only doing 3D, but they're doing it maybe for the second or third time. Wim Wenders is doing his second film. Ang Lee is now doing his second film. Jim Cameron's working on 3 more Avatar films. Martin Scorsese is doing more 3D. So it's a very exciting time because people are starting to figure out that it is a new way to tell stories, not just a way to make more money. And so that's why I think it's a really exciting time. And this conference is a very important one because it brings the European community to get together as well. It's interesting. 3D has, by and large, been coming from the studios saying, yes, we like this medium, let's make 3D. But they haven't really embraced the filmmaking community and brought them into those decisions to say, hey, let's all work together to make 3D. It's more been, you're the DP, you're going to make 3D. Well, that's not the right way to engage them. So I've spent the last 3 years training professionals, mostly cinematographers, to get them comfortable with the idea of telling stories in 3D, because 3D tends to be this group that's brought in by the studio, not by the camera department. It tends to be kind of a separate group from the production, which it really needs to be part of the same group. And we're people starting to realize that now. And so the directors who take it very seriously, 3D is an integral part of the creative team. It's not a separate technical team. It's not something outside of the creative process. They consider it part of the creative process. But it's been slow to get to that point. So there has been a lot of tension with those studios that have, for example, a DOP who's not all that interested in 3D, but was told he's making a 3D movie, so okay, but doesn't really want to deal with it. Which is also what we're seeing with a number of directors who are told they want to make 3D. So they said, well, I okay, but I would rather do it in post-production. So they don't even shoot 3D, they convert 3D, which I think is sort of a tragedy because it's not doing service to the medium. It may be making a 3-dimensional version of their 2D story, but it's not furthering the cause of storytelling. So I think we're getting past the point of a lot of tension with these productions, and the few productions that are doing 3D are doing it for fairly good reasons if they're shooting natively. In a situation where they're doing conversion, they're not even thinking about 3D until post-production, which is a real mistake, I think. It's not a 3D movie, as far as I'm concerned. It's not 2D, but it's certainly not a 3D film. And so I think we've gotten past a lot of that tension, and now it's just a matter of making these filmmakers feel empowered to try new things. And we're seeing that films like Gravity are not big even though there are a lot of visual effects in the movie is not about the visual effects. The visual effects create the environment, but it's a very real human story that connects viewers to actors in a story that you couldn't tell any other way. And I think many filmmakers are starting to see that and go, oh, maybe I do like 3D after all, because it's different, as opposed to it being just things throwing at the camera all the time. So I think the fighting is starting to subside, and now we're starting to work together. I do a lot of work talking with directors, getting them comfortable with 3D before they even start the movie. Because if they're not comfortable with it, that's when the tension comes in, and it's crazy on the set, and there's too many people, and what do you do, and what's this equipment for, and why does it take so long, and that sort of thing, and that shouldn't be the case. And it doesn't have to be the case. The most challenging part I find in shooting S3D is giving filmmakers the time to experiment, to find the kinds of shots that are helping to tell the story in a way that's unique to 3D. Too many filmmakers are caught up with all the other decisions they have to make. So 3D is like, oh yeah, I have to make 3D. And then they kind of let the 3D decisions be somebody else's decision, like the stereographer, which I personally think is wrong. They should be responsible for the 3D, but they should be helping the filmmaker with the vision as to how 3D is going to tell the story. So the director has some responsibility in that most of them are not taking. So it kind of becomes someone else's responsibility. And I think in order for it to be successful, it has to merge. So that's why directors and DOPs need more time to experiment with actors and scenes, not just cameras and figuring out rigs. That's not it at all. It shouldn't be about technology. It's just two cameras. If they're already familiar with one camera, two shouldn't be that hard. Now it's a question of how do I use this in relation to the scene, the emotion, the intent, to best effect, and you can't just make that up. You have to experiment with that. Because of these great films like Gravity that have been out recently, I think it renews the audience's interest in 3D, but we're at a strange time because of this, in the consumer electronics world at least, this idea that 4K is suddenly very important. Ultra high definition television is very important. No one's asked for it. It's all these manufacturers saying, no, it's important, trust us, it's important. And so then the viewers get concerned. They're like, well, wait, I thought it was 3D, but now you're saying no, it's 4K, as if they're somehow different, but they're not. They actually work quite well together. So the messaging has been very confused lately. So our struggle right now as filmmakers is to keep the idea of 3D alive, whether it's 2K or film or 4K or 8K or whatever it is. 3D should still be relevant as part of that storytelling. It's not instead of, oh, we're going to do 4K, but not 3D or something like that. That's a crazy argument. But now we find ourselves having to spend more time convincing people that, no, you really do need to consider 3D. And in the movie industry, 3D is still a very valuable part of the process. It makes a lot of money for the studios, even now, with fewer films. So I don't see it going away. In fact, if anything, it will improve. Television has been disappointing, especially in the States. There's very little good 3D television. There's only really one channel. And in other parts of the world, they have better programming than we do. They have more programming than we do. Certainly more diversity of programming. And I think the challenge is trying to figure out how to get 3D to become very common in the home. And so far, that's been a struggle everywhere in the world. But it's getting there. It's just very slow. But I have to remind people always, when high-definition television came along, it took 30 years for it to become commonplace in the home. And 3D's had maybe 5 years. And people are like, well, where is it? It's not fair to say, well, it didn't succeed in 5 years, so it must be a failure. If high definition took 30, we still have a ways to go.